Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Nightmare Theater, episode 12th. Tonight we're going to be talking about famous nightmares / famous people's nightmares. So this will include a bit of sort of like modern day US celebrity nightmares, as well as, and by nightmares I also mean dreams, as well as dreams that sort of changed the world, as it were. So we'll get into that. Following the presentation, we're going to be reading some more nightmares from Reddit, and I don't believe we have any viewer-submitted nightmares this week, but that is just fine. Thanks for joining me. I thought it might be a little more quiet tonight, seeing as it's still sort of the holiday for a lot of people, although it's not like it takes a lot of work to be here. But anyway, they might be busy doing something else. Anyway, let's get on with this presentation. Oops. Okay, looks good. Right, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about some dreams and nightmares that changed the world to begin with, and then after that it'll be a little bit looser when we get into some of the celebrity nightmares. So, starting with Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. So in 1816, the story of Frankenstein, often cited as the world's first science fiction novel, was inspired by a vivid nightmare. At just 18 years old, Shelley visited Lord Byron by Lake Geneva in Switzerland. They were locked in a cold volcanic winter caused by the eruption of Mount Tambora the year prior, which created Europe's year without summer. This is something that I'm unfamiliar with, but it sounds interesting. They were stuck indoors and huddled around a log fire. Byron suggested that they each write a ghost story. But night after night, Shelley was unable to think of anything suitable. Then, one evening, when discussion turned to the nature of life, Shelley suggested perhaps a corpse could be reanimated, backed by the thought that galvanism had given token to such things. Later that night, after turning in, her imagination took hold and she experienced what she described as a vivid waking dream. I saw a pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavor to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world. So, Frankenstein came to her as a waking dream. Fairly interesting. In 1965, Paul McCartney composed the entire melody of the hit acoustic song Yesterday in a dream. It came to him fully formed, and when he woke up, he quickly replicated the song on his piano, asking his friends and family if they had ever heard it before. He was initially worried that he was simply replicating someone else's work, known as cryptomnesia, which I feel like I've had that, worry in writing things sometimes, where, you're concerned that maybe you have heard this somewhere before, but you forgot where you heard it and your brain thinks it's an original thought. This is a direct quote. For about a month, I went round to people in the music business and asked them whether they had heard it before. Eventually, it became like handing something to the police. I thought if no one claimed it after a few weeks, then I could have it. Kind of an interesting story. Niels Bohr, atomic structure. So, Niels Bohr, of course, is considered the father of quantum mechanics. He often spoke of an inspirational dream that led to his discovery of the structure of the atom. So he set upon understanding the structure of the atom, but none of his configurations would fit in his modeling. One night he went to sleep and began dreaming about atoms. He saw the nucleus of the atom, with electrons spinning around it, much as the planets spin around their sun. Immediately upon waking, Bohr felt the vision was accurate, but as a scientist he knew the importance of validating his idea before announcing it to the world. He returned to his lab and searched for evidence to support his theory. It held true, and Bohr's vision of atomic structure turned out to be one of the greatest breakthroughs of his day. Bohr was later awarded a Nobel Prize for Physics as a result of this leap in creative thinking while asleep. And if you've taken any university chemistry, you may know that it's a little more complicated than simply electrons that orbit a nucleus like planets orbit the sun, but his model is still used today for certain things. It's a good way of thinking about certain things. Elias Howe, a different type of sewing machine. So sewing machines already existed when this dream was had, but he was the first to have a patent in the US for a lock stitch design of sewing machine. So he dreamed that he was building a sewing machine for a savage king in a strange country, just as in his actual working experience, he was perplexed about the needle's eye and thought the king gave him 24 hours in which to complete the machine and make it sew. If not finished by that time, death would be the punishment. Excuse me. Howe worked and worked and puzzled and finally gave it up. Then he thought he was being taken out to be executed. He noticed that the warriors carried spears that were pierced near the head. Instantly came to the solution of the difficulty, and while the inventor was begging for time, he awoke. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, and he jumped out of bed, ran to his workshop, and by 9, a needle with an eye at the point had been rudely modeled. After that, it was easy. That's the true story of an important incident in the invention of the sewing machine. Fairly interesting. So under the pressure that he created for himself in the dream, he was able to find a solution. Pretty interesting. Albert Einstein, relativity. So as a young man, Einstein dreamed that he was sledding down a steep mountainside, going so fast that eventually he approached the speed of light. And at this moment, the stars in his dream changed their appearance in relation to him. He awoke and meditated on this idea, soon formulating what would become one of the most famous scientific theories in the history of the world. Robert Louis Stevenson, and authoring Jekyll and Hyde. So he was very ill at the time, and in a fever dream, he imagined 3 key sequences of Jekyll and Hyde, including the first was the transformation of the criminal Hyde into Jekyll as a means of escaping authority after committing a crime. I neglected to write down what the other aspects of the dream were, but there were 3 separate ones, and that was the first of them, from which he later wrote the rest of the book. Otto Loewi, I don't know how to pronounce that name, but nerve impulses. So in 1921, Loewi dreamed of an experiment that would prove once and for all that the transmission of nerve impulses was chemical rather than electrical. He woke up, scribbled the experiment down, and went back to sleep. The next morning, he arose to try his experiment, but was horrified to find that he couldn't read his midnight ramblings. That day, he said it was the longest day of his life, as he tried but failed to recall his own dream. But luckily, on the following night, he had the same dream repeat itself, and upon waking, went directly to his lab to prove the Nobel Prize-winning theory of the chemical transmission of the nervous impulse. August Kekuli, the structure of benzene. A lot of science ones. The prominent German organic chemist insightfully dreamed of the structure of benzene molecule, which, unlike other organic compounds, had a circular shape rather than a linear one. He said he discovered the ring shape of the benzene molecule, after having a reverie of a snake seizing its own tail, a common ancient symbol known as the Ouroboros. So he just envisaged a circle. Frederick Banting, insulin. So although he lacked knowledge of diabetes and clinical research, his unique knowledge of surgery combined with his assistant's, Charles Best, his assistant's knowledge of diabetes made the ideal research team. While seeking to isolate the exact cause of diabetes, Banting had a dream telling him to surgically ligate, or tie up, the pancreas of a diabetic dog in order to stop the flow of nourishment. He did, and discovered a disproportionate balance between sugar and insulin. Dmitry Mendeleev, who organized the periodic table. So he claimed to have envisioned a complete arrangement of the elements in a dream. While struggling to correctly orient the elements, he recalls seeing them in a dream, a table where all the elements fell into place as required. Awaking, he immediately wrote them down on a piece of paper. Only in one place did a correction later seem necessary. So it's amazing what the subconscious mind might really be aware of. For those who don't know, I myself I'm a fourth year PhD student in microbiology, and seeing all these, these are like extremely like heavy hitters in science, and so many of them claim to have had these breakthroughs come to them in dreams. And I'm thinking, like, I mean, I know Mendeleev was really hardcore as well. Like, he locked himself in the basement until he figured it out and whatnot. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I could get better data if I, locked myself down and really, like, they really just force their minds around the problem, because I've never once dreamed about the stuff that I do in the lab. So, like, these guys they just make it their whole existence, and that's maybe what you need to achieve these sorts of great things. Anyway, not all great things come of dreams. So Xerxes I, he invaded Greece after being inspired to do so by a recurring dream. So the invasion failed. I'm pretty sure this is actually what the movie 300's about. So, not every case should you just listen to what your dream is suggesting. But certainly probably in Abraham Lincoln's case. So 3 days prior to his assassination, Abraham Lincoln related a prophetic dream he had to his wife and a few friends that foreshadowed his death. According to the recollection of his loyal friend and confidant Ward Hill Lamon, President Abraham Lincoln dreams on this night in 1865 of the subdued sobs of mourners. Walking from room to room, he noticed a corpse lying on the catafalque in the White House East Room. In the dream, Lincoln asked a soldier standing guard, "Who is dead in the White House?" To which the soldier replied, "The president. He was killed by an assassin." Lincoln jumped out of bed at that point on April 11th, and 3 days after having this vivid nightmare, Lincoln was shot dead at point-blank range by the assassin John Wilkes Booth while attending the theater, as we've all heard. So yeah, there's a case where maybe you did want to listen to the dream. It's really just Xerxes out of this presentation so far that shouldn't have. But that was sort of the nightmares that changed the world element of the presentation today. And now we're going to get into some more sort of like Us Magazine, Cosmo type celebrities. And we're just going to be talking about their nightmares. And then the article that I got this from, I got it from a few articles, but they were kind of analyzing the dreams themselves. I didn't look at any of that because that's what we do here. So we'll just look at their nightmares and try to, interpret them with some of the things that we've learned. So Celine Dion has apparently recurring nightmares about choking. And I don't think we have anything on our dream chart that really gets into choking nightmares per se, but we do have things, looking at maybe the inability to speak, although I do think that this is probably more of an injury, and in her case it may even be more of a like specific to her type dream in terms of her inability to sing, which is the same kind of interpretation that the article was coming to. But again, choking could be an injury, which would indicate a feeling of insecurity, or it could be again a feeling of not being able to speak, so it's sort of like a silent scream. So it feels like maybe there's something that she needs to get off her chest but she can't. Taylor Swift, so this is interesting. So apparently she dreams about being the murderer and doing murdering, and this is a direct quote: "I always have nightmares that I'm being framed for murder, and then I'm being framed so well that I can't remember if I did it or not in the dream. So that really winds me up, and then I'm just freaked out for the next couple of days." So, I mean, you may recall dreams where you are the aggressor and doing the murdering often mean that you have a feeling of guilt that you're not addressing. So it could be some sort of feeling of guilt. The article I got this from, of course, is mentioning her long string of relationships, and, you know, evidently she seems to, in her songs, like recount that it's the fault of the other, but perhaps she senses to an extent that maybe she is the common denominator in these situations that she finds herself in. Maybe that could be the stem from which the feeling of her guilt sprouts. Rihanna had a nightmare that she and her brother watched a plane crash into a skyscraper. The skyscraper then collapsed onto her brother. So this was recalled, I believe, on a radio show in 2005. So, I mean, it does have sort of a similarity to 9/11, you would think. Hard to say. I'd need to know more maybe about like what her brother does as to why she might think that that sort of thing was happening, but also the fact that it's sort of a cataclysmic event. We could sort of analyze it from that angle, and recognize that those are just sort of indicators of uncertainty about the future. And then it could also be related to maybe how she feels or felt at that time about her relationship with her brother. So like maybe she just felt like she hadn't reached out to him in a while and wondered how she was doing, and maybe it was a combination of uncertainty about the future tied in with that. Kate Middleton. So Kate has reportedly had the same recurring dream about being naked in public since 2006, and she's described it as she suddenly becomes aware that she's completely naked, there's a deathly silence, and everyone from the Queen to Prince Philip is staring at her. So, as we know, dreams where you're naked is supposed to indicate a sort of a sense of insecurity and maybe like not wanting to be in the public eye. I mean, especially since, this is someone who was not in the royal family and then sort of married into it. I can imagine that would come with a lot of pressure, right? So that's probably what that's related to. Just like doesn't want to let anybody down, feels insecure about her new sort of place in the world, perhaps, and being judged, obviously, from the Queen to Prince Philip, all these people staring at her. I feel like that's a pretty easy one to interpret. And along similar lines, Holly Berry has said that she's had a recurring dream about her teeth falling out of her mouth while she's talking for most of her life. And this is another one that, like being naked, if you recall some of our earlier presentations, like episode 6, episode 4, teeth falling out, like being naked, indicates a sense of insecurity, or it's thought to indicate a sense of insecurity. Not wanting, like thinking that maybe there's something wrong with you, or thinking that, not wanting to be looked at. And I feel like I wonder if these sorts of dreams would be more common among people that have more time in the public eye. Madonna, apparently she has a recurring dream where she's being chased, and as we know, the way that you run in your dream from your chaser is the way you run in real life, and also who your chaser is can indicate who you feel you're being chased by in real life. In her case, though, what's interesting is that she says that she's being chased by a knife-wielding dwarf. So it's hard to understand what that might represent. It could be maybe a stalker. Maybe it's a dwarf because she feels superior to them. It's just like a smaller person. Maybe she feels like big. The ego imagines itself as larger than the stalker. Who knows? But the fact that it's knife wielding, I guess, is just maybe an insecurity about the element of the unknown. Again, being in the public eye. Like, I wonder, if any of us put in the same situation would start to have any of these nightmares more frequently than we currently do. Interesting thought. Gwyneth Paltrow. So it's about this is a direct quote. It's about a California Victorian beach house, and I've got all this stained glass. Then I find while I'm in this house that it's moving down a river, and I don't know how to get out. So that's a dream about being trapped, and you may recall that dreams about being trapped indicate, as you might expect, that you're feeling trapped in real life. What's interesting also is that it's a house made out of stained glass. So she's trapped in. I mean, again, like I'm kind of interpreting most of these as nightmares about celebrity itself, like about being famous. Like, maybe the fact that it's stained glass, it's sort of like it warps the light into a different color than it really is. Maybe she feels, trapped in a sense of herself that she doesn't think is authentic. That would be my best interpretation there. And then this is the last one. So Lady Gaga, this is a direct quote. There's a blonde girl in my house with ropes tied to all 4 of her limbs, and she's got my shoes on, and the ropes are pulling her apart, says Lady Gaga. So again, this is about being trapped, although there's an element of not only being trapped, but the bindings are dismantling her. It really is her, because it's got her shoes on, and it's a blonde girl. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory yet again, like feeling trapped in the celebrity of it, and then also pulled apart by it, like maybe the authentic self will soon cease to exist. Anyway, kind of a weird presentation this week, but I hope you enjoyed it regardless. I hope some of you enjoyed that. I gotta get rid of my stuff. I'm getting sloppy as I get more comfortable with these streams. Let's see what the comments are. Mary Shelley was on opium. Everyone at that party was. Interesting. Well, it certainly sounded like a good setting. Just hanging out in Lake Geneva in the summer, but it's kind of cold. Yeah, like it kind of made me want to go. Even just like sometimes you just hear the name of a place and it's like, ooh, I kind of want to go there. Many famous books have also been conceived in dreams. Jonathan Livingston's Seagull was almost all from a dream. Author woke up and typed till the book was done. Wow. That's hard to believe. That's a lot of words. I think I write books as a hobby, and I think the most I've done in like one day is maybe like 11,000 words, and that was like a full day. So that's kind of hard to believe, because a book is, 80 to 120,000. So I don't know if I buy that. Xerxes sounds like a crazy. Well, I mean, he's just someone from the ancient world, right? Like they had a whole different thing going on, didn't they? Maybe it's a fear about her voice, unable to breathe. Yeah, I agree. I think T.S. Taylor Swift is happy to move on as she pleases. Great songwriter. All right. You don't have to defend her. She's not watching this. Kate Middleton had pop pics taken of her naked in 2012, so her dream came true. Interesting. I don't know when her quote was from. Jonathan Livingston was a novella. Oh, there you go. Makes sense. But now, let's get into some Reddit nightmares. This is a post by a user named Saint_Saya_lover. The post is titled, I was burnt alive. The post reads, the dream started as a night... Let me try that again. The dream started at nighttime. I lived in an American suburb. I had a 2-story house of wood painted white with a dark roof. The neighborhood seemed tranquil at first, but we had problematic neighbors. I was with some of my siblings outside my house, in the garden, which was just very short, almost inexistent grass. Our house didn't have any light on despite it being late and dark. Considering how American everything looked, maybe we didn't even live there. In the next scene, now I was at my real house. For context, a couple months ago we got a door. Those to keep the insects out. I feel like there's a word missing. But allow the wind to pass through doors. Okay, so like a screen door. Never mind, there's not a word missing. Well, it was all right, but it had 2 locks, one on the inside and one to lock it from the outside. When I saw they were installing that door with the outer lock, I tried to stop them because anyone can lock us in from the outside, but they ended up putting it. I think this person's... Well, clearly they're not American, but I don't know what their first language is. In the nightmare, it was maybe an hour before night fell. It was... I was outside, playing as if I were a kid. Then, this not bad-looking guy approached me and offered something. I rejected his advances, and his smile never dropped, but his eyes held a grudge. He insisted on trying to hang out with me, but just wasn't interested. Eventually, he left. In the next scene, I'm in the kitchen with my family. Usually my dreams don't have sound, but all silence broke when I heard something. My family and I took a while to recognize what it was, but something dawned to me and ran towards a window and saw the source of the sound. Next scene. It's seen from an outsider point of view. I can see myself from the street. I'm screaming for help because someone's lit my house on fire and locked us in from the outside. It was only the sound of crackling flames and my family's screams. I woke up tense, hugging my arms. A couple of minutes, I calmed down, but 2 weeks after I still recall the sounds. That morning, I debated whether or not I should tell my family. They ignored me when I mentioned the lock after all. Eventually, decided to disclose my nightmare and was ignored as well. I'm not young anymore, but it hurts to know I'm not taken into consideration, especially when I'm sure my fear is valid. Like I said, I don't have friends anymore, so here. Well, I mean, they did the analysis themselves for the most part, right? Like you feel, yeah, like there's really little to analyze here. You feel that your family doesn't listen to you or respect you when you bring up a concern, and you feel that the concern of the door itself, was something nightmare worthy. And then there is one element that you don't really look into yourself, which is the fear of retaliation after rejecting this guy. And perhaps that was just, a means in the dream to explore the lock fear. But it could be, a deeper fear. Like your house could have been on fire without the guy being there. So the guy may have some significance after all. The guy, maybe at the time you did reject a guy and you felt like he held a grudge. Or maybe there was a guy that, you're friends with that maybe you suspect he wants more. And, deep down you kind of are like afraid of him, something like that. And maybe, you want to put more distance, but you're afraid to. That type of situation. Anyway, that's the best I got for that. This is a post by a user named You Will Not Go to Space. The post is titled Attack of the Zombie Beak Dogs. The post reads, Last night, I dreamed the dream world I was in was falling apart. Literally, chunks of buildings were floating off or falling into nothing or catching fire and disintegrating. I was helping the police and firefighters get people outside to where it seemed safer, but then I saw them. They were these ugly, rotting wolf things the size of Great Danes with spiky, furry parrot beaks, or skinless, sharp jaws or something. Some were missing pieces of their heads, like they had been shot. One had some scales between its one green eye and its chewed-up nose. It had been fighting one of the others. I smelled a dead rat and rotting ham. I smelled blood and dust. When one saw me, I stood there looking like, WTF is this crap? It was over. He ran to me from across the street, so fast that all I could see was a gray and brown smear. It ripped out my throat and started eating me immediately. I was trying to cough up blood before I hit the sidewalk. My throat hurt when I woke up. Interesting. So, my first thought is that it's an apocalypse dream. Or, natural, if you look under the second category here, natural disasters, and then at the bottom, apocalypse dreams can indicate a big change is happening in your life. So, obviously this is an apocalypse on multiple levels. You have beak dogs in the streets, which kind of reminded me of griffins a bit, except obviously they have beaks, they have a head of an eagle, and then wings of whatever it is, also an eagle maybe, and then body of a lion, something of that nature. So, mythical creatures essentially, even, a beak dog doesn't sound too far from that. And it needn't have been a beak dog, though, probably, unless there's some, maybe parrot or dog in real life that you're afraid of. But I suspect this is more just a sense of apocalypse in general, because you also have, as you mentioned, buildings disintegrating and pieces of the earth falling into a state of the void, essentially ceasing to exist. I don't know necessarily that the monsters themselves matter. And then at the end, the injury could indicate something, especially you said that you woke up with a sore throat. You could have had maybe acid reflux, which I have, and you fall asleep in a dream. That was a nonsense statement that I just made. When you're asleep and you're dreaming and you're having acid reflux, you're obviously not aware of it when you're dreaming, and then your throat dries out and it just is like really sore. And then sometimes you might have a nightmare where that sort of works itself into the nightmare, so that could indicate why your throat was being bit. That's the most easy explanation for a sore throat. Additionally, I guess you could have been sick. But yeah, that's likely, it's more likely that the sore throat is causing that incident in the dream rather than vice versa. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if it matters that there's a beak on the dog or not, and that is something that I would need more information to analyze, whether there's some sort of animal that's weirding you out in real life, something of that nature. But maybe check out acid reflux, see if you think you have that. A little bit of a medical tip for the audience as well. There you go. This is a post by a user named Red Hat Luke. The post is titled The Beach. The post reads, "Not too long ago, maybe last year, I had a nightmare where I was growing like a tree out of the shore of a beach. Right next to me was my mother, although not my real one. I identified her as that, and she was growing out the exact same way. We were essentially these human trees that were stuck in the ground, unable to die and constantly suffering as we would drown when the tide came in. This happened for years, and one night my mother reassured me that although we were in hell, at least we still had each other. The next morning, 2 men in black suits came to us, and they started cutting my mother out of the ground, blood went everywhere, and she screamed in agony, and although we were immortal, she stopped screaming. She was dead. The men took the upper half of her body, leaving me with this bloodied stump where she used to be, and I was going to be on that beach forever, drowning every single night. I don't know why it was so specific. I never had a dream that had a structure like this before. I may write a story about it. Well, I encourage you to. That is probably one of the most unique dreams I've read in the 12 episodes of doing this. Really freaky dream. So, I mean, the biggest feeling that I get in terms of my interpretation of this is that you have a feeling of guilt about something, and it could be partially but not entirely related to your mother. So yeah, it's really interesting to see yourself as a tree, though. I mean, my interpretation of that is going to have to be a feeling of being trapped. So, right, can indicate that you have claustrophobic anxiety. I think that's less likely to be the case here. And without claustrophobia, it could indicate that you feel you're being held back from reaching your potential somehow. Unhealthy relationship or a dead-end job. So now I'm going to pair this up with the whole guilt feeling I got from it, and maybe the thought of the mother there. So it could be maybe that, I don't know your situation, obviously. This is pure speculation. That's what I do here, but it's fun. And, take of this what you will. But it could be that you feel like maybe your mother is holding you back. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you feel like she depends on you to a certain extent, but in order to grow, you need to detach from her. That's maybe like a common story or a common feeling you might experience being like a young man. I don't know if you're a man or a woman. I guess it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman. Being a young woman as well, right? Like you may, children need to at some point attach from their parents, or so I hear. And yeah, it could just be a feeling of guilt. You feel like you're abandoning her, perhaps. That's really all I can do with the information I have. I mean, and then the fact that you're drowning as well. So there's more to this. Hang on, let me get my chart back out. So drowning is its own thing, right? Yeah, a drowning nightmare can indicate that you're overwhelmed with emotion or you're repressing desires or thoughts. So, maybe you don't want to tell your mom that you feel like you need, more space, something like that. Or maybe you want to like move away and move out. I don't know what your situation is at all, but you know what I mean? Like there's some aspect in which I feel like you're disappointing your mom and that you deserve to be punished for it. So even after, she's gone, you're there for eternity. Like you had to witness the bad thing happening to her. You had to witness that feeling of disconnection, and you feel like you caused it and you want to punish yourself forever for it. I would say that's the best I can do in interpreting that nightmare, but really interesting nightmare. Definitely encourage you to write a story about it. Red Hat Luke. Luke sounds like a male name, so maybe I was right in imagining you as a male, but maybe not. Anyway, that's horrible. Yeah, that's a very horrible and fascinating dream. Kudos to that, and best of luck with that. Hopefully you don't have it recur, because you said it went on for years, like Tsukiyomi in Naruto. Just your suffering is eternal within your own dream. That's terrible. Best of luck again. I'm going to read another nightmare. This is a post by a user named BitchLasagna789. The post is titled, "I found this subreddit, so I'm going to tell you all my worst nightmares." Here we go, there's 3 of them here. The post reads, "It starts 4 years ago. I had nightmares before that, of course, but these dreams had a different tone and feeling. I'm partly lucid. I gain control and I lose it." The post reads, I already said the post reads, but this is the first nightmare of the 3. Human dog. I was sitting on a bench in a park in my hometown. I tend to observe people, what they're doing. I saw a young lady with her dog, a black-gray pit bull. She was sitting on the ground with some food in front of her. The dog was lying next to her. The woman stood up and walked away. I was looking at the dog to see its reaction. First it just got its head up and looked in the way she left. Then it started to look around. When it realized no one else is there, it changed its expression and posture and started to act like a human. It reaches for food and started to eat it. It noticed me, looking at me. It smiled like it was busted. I was shocked and started screaming I'm too freaked out to even read. I was shocked and started screaming that was stuck in my throat. I froze and fell off. I do that in many times in my dreams when seeing something terrifying and I wake up screaming, or rather a deep long ah. I was always freaked out when animals act like humans. Yeah, that is really freaky. I'm gonna analyze these like one at a time just because that was like high quality and I want to give each one like the attention it deserves. I have absolutely no idea what that dream could mean. Very interesting in terms, like, really freaked me out. Really good like horror movie plot, you'd think, just pets that are actually like super intelligent and maybe are like manipulating the humans in some regard, and the way it acts when it's not being observed. There is something very intelligent about animals, like when you watch just the way that they behave, even though you know that they're not on the same level as a human, sometimes they seem just as smart as the smartest humans, just in how like sure they are of themselves. That's something that I almost admire. They're like an animal is just always very, not always, like a dog will sometimes not be confident, but oftentimes a dog will be extremely when a dog commits to doing something, it's extremely confident about it. And cats are always seem extremely confident, and they always, like, whatever they do they do it with such conviction that it almost masquerades maybe as like a greater intelligence than it really is. But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the congruence. Like, they're just very congruent in their being in a way that humans aren't. But I've often wondered that too. Like, what if the dog is really as smart as I am and he's just pretending to be cute because it's an easy meal ticket. Something like that. Interesting. I really have no idea what that could be like about though, but anyway, on to the next one. The next dream is I had a lot of nightmares about yellow cats. In this one, I found this stray cat on the street and took it home. It was a normal cat at first, but after, I just felt that it was not okay. I knew this cat was evil, and that it's pretending to be a cat. Okay, so there's a pattern happening here. That it knows much more than I think. I grabbed it and took it outside. As soon as I turned around, it was right there in the house, meowing at me. I was even more freaked out. I started to kick it, beat it, grabbed a knife and stabbed it, but it stood up and kept meowing. I went insane as I saw the cat's happy face. I think it was even walking on the wall and the ceiling. There are these people who think that cats are actually like aliens, right? Because they'll sometimes engage in weird behavior. And I don't know, like, I get kind of that vibe reading some of these nightmares. But again, we have, another case of animals being more human-like, or you have a fear that animals are just secretly intelligent and out to get you. That's really interesting. I'm just going to read the third one just to see if it's related before I go back to this. So 3. So these ones are not really nightmares, but strange for sure. I was standing in front of my house, but I knew it was a different place, like a different timeline. Nobody was around. I knew the town was empty. The sky was bright orange, I had a headset on, and the guy started talking to me, giving me instructions on more like describing what's happening to me here in this timeline. As I walked down our street, I got to a house. On the porch were these big porcelain bodies. Female bodies, but only from hips to feet. They were all kinds of colors, some of them were broken. The voice said, "In this house lives a woman who's waiting for her lover for 18 years. I suddenly had a feeling that it might be me, but I can't stay. I felt terribly sorry, like I let her down, and she's going to wait forever." The voice said, "Let's go," and I found myself at a bus station. The bus parked in, and the driver had a rope around his body, with a dead woman tightened to his body. The lady was rotten, like a mummy. The voice said this man couldn't live without his grandmother after she died. I also felt terrible for him and for the lady in the previous scene. I can't really describe how I felt, but I felt like the weight on my heart. I felt a weight on my heart like never before. I felt real tragedy. The voice said, "It's time to go now." I woke up. I felt sad for the whole week. So that is not related to the animal dreams. I feel like my analysis of the first one kind of ties in well with the second one, though, but we'll just take a look at this third one. I wonder if this could be some form of a feeling of guilt. But it's hard to know what it could be about. I don't know. Maybe you have a friend that you feel like wants something more from you, but you feel like you can't be that for them. And then the second part where there's the bus driver who can't let go of his grandmother. It's not you, though. I don't know. I mean, like, maybe it's an example of someone just holding on way too long, which I guess is the similarity or the commonality between the bus driver and the lady in the house. Both cases where someone's just waiting for too long when they need to just let go and move on. Again, like, I can't really, the fact that you are, attributing this to yourself in the first case, I mean, I can't really say it for the second case, but it makes me think that you have a feeling of guilt that maybe someone isn't moving on. Maybe it's an ex, something of that nature, and you feel like they're doing these horrific things to themselves on your behalf, and you wish that they wouldn't. That's the best I got, I'm afraid. Oh, whoops. Don't like cruelty to animals. Well, maybe cats is okay, but not dogs. Okay, let's be nice to the cats as well. This is a very sad dream with the weight on the chest. Yeah. Maybe the dreamer has strung someone along and failed to be honest, allowing them to spend 18 years waiting to be loved. Yeah, that was sort of similar to my own feelings about it. Let's try to do 2 more. These are sort of longish ones. This is a post by a user named Emmy Yog. The post is titled, "Lucid Dream Gone Wrong." The post reads, "Hello. I never really post on Reddit. Maybe something on here, there, but never post. I had the desire to share this nightmare of mine because I've never experienced something like it. Let me start from the beginning. It was around 2 o'clock yesterday, and I didn't get a wink of sleep the previous night. I had just moved home from the dorms for Christmas break, so I decided to take a well-needed nap. With most naps, I tend to let myself lucid dream. I don't nap very often, nor do I like to. I fell asleep pretty quickly. The dream begins, and I'm in a live audience television studio. I'm a part of the crew. I did some narration stuff or something, not exactly sure. Before the show started, the director came up to me and said, "This is not a dream, Emily. Remember that." Which I knew was my subconscious warning me that it was going to try to take back control of my dream. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I know it's not. I'm in control here." Then grunted and walked away from me. I thought that was me regaining my grip on the situation. Boy, was I wrong. As the cast and crew took their places and everything in the show began, midway through an emergency announcement pinged over the intercom. It said, "If you're not 6 feet away from an electronic device, please do so now. I repeat." Before the message could be finished, a large amount of static came out of every device and fried everyone's brains, including mine. Everyone around me was dead, but I survived. This was the first dream where I felt pain that was being inflicted on me. Just seconds as I was regaining my thoughts, a large crash happened. I turned around and saw a man. Now this man was the scariest thing I've seen in my lucid dreams. Lucid nightmares have a whole different fear than normal nightmares. This man was probably about 7 feet tall, tan, leathery skin, intimidatingly large muscles. His hair was black, long, and greasy. His jaw was very defined. His body was covered in cuts, including his face. He was wearing a black t-shirt with a white weathered apron and black loose pants. His back was arched and he walked with a limp. His boots were large enough to crush my head. After taking in everything about him, he begins making his way towards me. I told myself it was a dream and I could take over. I ran and found a gun, but it would make my and said I would make my shots, but every time I shot his way, I missed. I was practically screaming in my head, "You will make this shot. You hit him." And every time I missed. No matter what, I couldn't make the shot. He was closing in fast, saying nothing. I couldn't see his eyes, but I knew they were a dark void. I begged him to stop, but as he finally reached me, I forced myself awake. I shot awake and my head was pounding. Felt like it was on fire. I'm not sure what my subconscious was trying to show me. This might not seem as terrifying to some people as it did to me, but God, I've never felt so much fear from a dream. Thanks for reading. That is a scary one. I was looking as I was reading to see if he was wearing a hat, because I thought maybe it was a man in the hat nightmare, but it doesn't seem like he was wearing a hat, so... But you couldn't see his eyes, which is similar to the man in the hat. That is freaky. I mean, it almost sounds like... The vibe I get from it is a bit like a school shooting, except obviously the one with the gun is you. But it didn't really matter. And I mean, there are people who commit acts of mass murder in using all sorts of weapons, whether it's like a truck or a knife or whatever. But the vibe I got was still the same. Like there was some form of planned attack, and the static goes off. And yeah, I mean, maybe it didn't really matter that you were the last one alive. Maybe like that was just, as you say, you're wondering as you're like recalling the dream what your subconscious is trying to tell you about it. And maybe the point of seeing the guy, the way that he's dressed does remind me again of like a school shooter or whatever, like just kind of like the more like militaristic kind of gear, other than the white apron, which is kind of odd. I mean, maybe he's like a chef or something, maybe. I don't know. It's difficult to know without knowing more about the dreamer the extent to which the circumstances matter, like the fact that it's in an auditorium. Like, I don't know if you perform or you're involved in things with like a large group. The other thing is, like, it could maybe be about COVID. Like, I'm sort of just brainstorming all over the place here, right? Because, like, when all hell breaks loose, the first thing that gets said over the intercom is make sure you're within, 6 feet. Yeah, exactly. That was the exact number. 6 feet away from an electronic device. So, rather than the electronic device, maybe it's like people, and then everyone who was, within that distance was killed or injured in your case. I don't know. Maybe the man himself represents the coronavirus. 7 feet tall, tan leathery skin, intimidatingly large muscles. I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of like school shooting / coronavirus. I don't really know though. This is tough. Like, in terms of, I mean, you seem like an experienced lucid dreamer, and I'm someone who's never lucid dreamed before. So, like, the way that you like break it down in terms of like what your subconscious, the man that represents your subconscious that shows up in the beginning, like, that's wild to me. That like belongs in a movie, The emotions of a sleeping nightmare are quite different from emotions of a waking nightmare. They seem much worse, even though the waking nightmare is actually much worse. Interesting. I wonder if that's a reaction to my presentation rather than to this dream. But really interesting. Hope you got something out of that weak analysis, but I want to do one more before the show ends. This is a post by a user named Reeve1905. The post is titled, "I saw its face, and ever since I've struggled to fall asleep." The post reads, "I've had recurring sleep paralysis nightmares for the past 10 years or so, usually every 6 to 12 months or so, and usually when I'm at a point of high stress about something. After looking into it, I found that it seems fairly common, and I've become familiar with signs that it's starting, so I've usually been able to deal with it fairly well as I sleep on my stomach, so I never actually seen anything before like other people have. When it happens, I'm usually able to tell when it's starting, as I can hear it. I don't know how to describe it, but the sound, except that it's similar to when you're in the middle of a big yawn, and it gets almost like you can clearly hear the blood pumping through your head, or as if you're fully underwater and you have that muffled water sound. But by the time I hear that noise, it's too late. I already can't move or stop it. About 2 weeks ago, I fell asleep on my back while watching TV. I heard the same submersion-type noise and saw a figure come into the room. I thought it was my fiancé or my dog, so I tried calling out, as they're usually able to jolt me out of an episode if I'm able to make any kind of noise, but there was nobody there. All of a sudden, a small but skinny figure held down my shoulders. I didn't move to get on top of me. It didn't move to get on top of me. Just one moment it wasn't there, and the next moment it was. What I saw wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. It stared angrily straight into my eyes about 2 inches from my face, with shaggy shoulder-length hair. I could feel its breath and hair brushing against my face. It didn't have any features, no skin or bone. Its skin was just static, like an old TV. Oh, that's creepy. I could make out a wide, scowling mouth and hollow eyes, but not much else. It held me there, staring at me for what felt like a good 15 minutes. I started shouting for help as loudly as I could, in which reality was just a quiet moan in my sleep. Luckily, my fiancé heard me and came upstairs and woke me to see if I was okay. The moment she touched my leg, I woke up. The figure vanished into nothingness, and I continued shouting for help as loud as I could. Ever since then, I lost my place. Ever since then, I've really struggled to get to sleep. I know it's not real, but it was so terrifying. Like all of the other episodes I've had combined, plus more. And I'm scared to sleep in any position other than on my stomach in case it happens again. Sometimes, like tonight, I even spook myself by looking at our mirror when it's dark and seeing my own figure in the reflection, as the last thing I ever want to see if that figure is staring into my eyes again. Just a very classic, honest sleep paralysis story there. So, I mean, the most noteworthy thing here for me that kind of sets it apart from other sleep paralysis stories is that you mentioned that it felt like it was holding you for a good 15 minutes. Pretty unlikely that it was holding you for 15 minutes. An episode of sleep paralysis tends to last upwards of 3 minutes in rare cases. That's like the longest it ever goes. Again, I was kind of looking out to see if this is the man in the hat, but no, not wearing a hat again. Although it was very interesting that it was made of static. It doesn't really matter what it looks like though, right? And like a sleep paralysis demon or a hypnagogic hallucination, as it were, is a hypnagogic hallucination. I think probably, you have, as you've said, trained yourself to recognize that sound that you're falling underwater, which, by the way, is also a hypnagogic hallucination. It's just an auditory one. You've trained yourself to recognize when it's starting, and over time, you've found that it gets easier, and over time, I suspect as well, if you do, I hope that you don't continue to see this, obviously, but the next time you do find yourself in that situation, recognize that not as much time is passing as you actually think it is. I don't know if that would actually help or make you even more terrified, but recognize that it's actually probably only literally like minutes at a time, or like seconds that are passing that maybe feel like a minute each, right? And then also recognize that it is in fact a hallucination. Check out my episode 3 or my video that's on my channel page about sleep paralysis, and I go into like the science of it there, and like how you have hallucinations that are really just dreams projected onto reality, and the reason you're having a nightmare is because the feeling of not being able to move is uncomfortable, and the only thing that is real is that you are actually paralyzed. So you have your brain has shut down your motor neurons in a process called atonia, and that is real. But the demon that you're seeing isn't, right? So, like, maybe if you can train yourself to recognize that what you're seeing isn't real, and that the paralysis you're experiencing is temporary, and maybe even just like almost like go back to sleep, or just sleep it off, or just wave it off. Maybe you would stop having the nightmare of the demon, and you would stop having the hallucinations because you recognize that that's what they are, and that your state is temporary. So if you're not afraid of the paralysis, your brain won't be triggered to have the nightmare. That's the best I can do with that. Looking at my comments, it was a general comment on the way these nightmares affect dreamers and the people listening to the dreams. Oh, okay. That was referring to the comment about waking nightmares versus sleeping nightmares. Yes, that makes sense. This last dream is super scary. Yeah, these sleep paralysis ones are brutal. I'm glad not to have it myself. And yeah, take what I say about sleep paralysis with a grain of salt, having never had it myself, but I have read a lot about it at this point, having done the show for a while. Anyway, that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining me. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to next week. I hope we can, do this again. So 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as usual, Sunday night. Also check out my Thursday video, whatever that's going to be. Next week's presentation is going to be, I think, the purpose of dreams and nightmares. So this was something that I touched on like episode 1, but then I never really came back to it. So like I mentioned that it's your brain's way of processing memory and like working through stuff, right? And I've gone into like interpretation and all this other like more metaphysical details of it, but it might be good to look together. I'm not sure how much literature exists on this, so we'll find out. Like I'm going to be doing that reading, later, but I'm going to try my best to explain in greater scientific detail why we have dreams and nightmares and just how that processing might be taking place. Anyway, thanks once again. And is that everything? Yeah, subscribe and hit the bell to check out more videos and next week's stream and all that. And until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.